What happens when you tell your boyfriend it was just a joke after sharing a hotel bed with your best friend, and he responds not with anger, but with calm, careful action? How does a man who's been humiliated choose dignity and evidence over drama? Can you still call it harmless when the next knock at your door isn't forgiveness but official legal papers? The wine glass slipped from my fingers as Jasper's voice boomed across his crowded apartment. "Hey everyone, guess who shared my hotel bed at the conference last weekend?" His grin was infectious as he pointed directly at me. "Our girl Ivadne here." The room erupted in laughter, and I felt my cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and excitement. This was exactly the kind of attention I craved, being the center of the story, the fun one everyone wanted to hear about. "Oh my God, Jasper, you're terrible," I laughed, raising my hands dramatically. "It was completely innocent, people. The hotel messed up our reservations, and we had to share a room with one bed. We're adults. We can handle sleeping in the same space without it being weird." More laughter rippled through the crowd. I caught sight of Caleb standing near the kitchen doorway, his face pale and his jaw tight. My husband of 3 years looked like he'd been slapped, but I wasn't about to let his overreaction ruin my moment. "Caleb, honey, tell them," I called out, my voice bright and cheerful. "You know it was just a funny situation, right? Nothing happened." All eyes turned to my husband, and I watched as he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Right," he said quietly. "Just a funny situation." The party continued around us, but I noticed how Caleb retreated further into himself as the evening progressed. When Jasper started showing photos from the conference on his phone, including a selfie of us in bathrobes with the caption, "Roomies for the night," Caleb excused himself to the bathroom and didn't return for 20 minutes. "You're being dramatic," I whispered to him as we drove home later that night. "It was a joke, Caleb, a harmless joke. Why can't you just laugh about it like everyone else?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Because it's not funny to me, Ivadne. Having our private business, or what should have been private business, broadcast to a room full of people isn't my idea of humor." "Private business?" I scoffed. "It was a hotel mix-up. Nothing happened. You're acting like I cheated on you or something." "Didn't you?" The question was so quiet I almost missed it. "Excuse me?" My voice shot up an octave. "Are you seriously accusing me of cheating because I shared a bed with a friend? Caleb, we've known Jasper since high school. He's practically family." "Family doesn't post photos of you in a bathrobe on social media with suggestive captions." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Jasper's Instagram. The photo was still there, and I had to admit the caption was a bit much, but that was just Jasper's personality. He was always joking around. "Look, I'll ask him to take it down if it bothers you that much," I said, though I had no intention of doing so. The photo had already gotten 53 likes and dozens of comments about how fun and adventurous I was. Why should I give that up because my husband couldn't take a joke? When we got home, I immediately posted my own version of events on Facebook. When the hotel messes up your reservation and you end up sharing a room with your old friend, some people need to learn to laugh at life's little surprises. Just friends. Just life is short. No regrets. The likes and comments started pouring in immediately. My sister Lynn commented with a concerned face emoji, but my mother Roxana was much more supportive. "You're married, not buried, sweetheart. Live a little." That's exactly what I was doing, living. Unlike my husband, who seemed determined to turn every situation into a drama. The next morning, I woke up to 17 new notifications on my phone. The post had been shared 4 times, and people were tagging their friends in the comments. I felt a rush of validation. This was what it felt like to be interesting, to have stories worth telling. Caleb was already up making coffee in the kitchen with mechanical precision. He handed me a cup without looking at me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Thank you, I said, trying to gauge his mood. Listen, about last night. I need to ask you something, he interrupted, and I need you to be completely honest with me. My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. Of course. Did you and Jasper share that bed platonically, or was there more to it? The question hung in the air between us. I could have told him the truth, that Jasper and I had talked until 3 in the morning, that he'd kissed me goodnight, that I'd woken up with his arm around me and hadn't moved away immediately, because it felt nice to be held by someone who thought I was fun and spontaneous instead of irresponsible. Instead, I chose the version of the truth that served me better. Of course it was platonic. Caleb, I can't believe you'd even ask me that. We're friends. That's all we've ever been. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I believe you. But something in his tone suggested he didn't, not entirely. And as he walked away to get ready for work, I noticed he took his coffee mug with him instead of leaving it in the sink like he usually did. It was a small thing, but it felt significant somehow. Like he was taking care of his own business now, not trusting me with even the smallest responsibilities. I shook off the feeling and checked my phone again. 22 notifications now, and a new text from Jasper. Hope I didn't get you in trouble last night. Your husband looked pretty upset. I typed back quickly. He's fine, just needs to learn to take a joke. Thanks for a fun conference. The kissing emoji was probably unnecessary, but Jasper made me feel appreciated in a way Caleb hadn't in months. Was it so wrong to enjoy that feeling? My phone buzzed with another notification, this time from my work email. My supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, wanted to see me first thing Monday morning. The subject line simply read, Social Media Policy Discussion. A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed it away. Surely this wasn't about my personal posts. I was a good employee, always on time, always professional. One little Facebook post couldn't possibly be a problem. Could it? Monday morning arrived with the weight of unspoken tension. Caleb had barely said 2 words to me over the weekend, spending most of his time in his study grading papers or organizing his lesson plans with an intensity that seemed excessive even for him. Mrs. Patterson's office felt smaller than usual as I sat across from her polished desk, watching her scroll through something on her computer screen. Ivadne, she began, her voice carefully neutral. I wanted to discuss our company's social media policy with you. My palms grew sweaty. Is there a problem? She turned her monitor toward me, and I saw my Facebook post displayed on the screen. Somehow, seeing it in this sterile office environment made it look different, less fun and spontaneous, more inappropriate and unprofessional. One of our clients saw this post and expressed concerns about the judgment of our staff members. While your personal life is your own business, when you list our company as your employer on your profile, your posts reflect on us as well. I felt my face burn with embarrassment and anger. It was just a joke, a harmless situation that got blown out of proportion. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying you did anything wrong, Mrs. Patterson replied calmly. I'm simply asking you to be more mindful about what you share publicly. Perhaps adjust your privacy settings or reconsider the content you post. The meeting lasted another 10 minutes, but I barely heard the rest of it. All I could think about was how unfair this was, how a simple, innocent situation was being twisted into something scandalous by people who didn't understand the context. When I got home that evening, I found Caleb in his study, surrounded by neat stacks of papers and folders. He looked up when I entered, but his expression remained carefully blank. How was your day? He asked, the question sounding more like a formality than genuine interest. Fine, I lied, then immediately changed my mind. Maybe if I told him about the meeting, he'd understand how his overreaction was affecting other areas of my life. Actually, no, it wasn't fine. I got called into my supervisor's office because of that stupid Facebook post. A client complained. I expected sympathy, or at least acknowledgement that the situation had gotten out of hand, Instead, Caleb just nodded. "I'm sorry that happened," he said, but his tone suggested he wasn't surprised. "That's it. You're sorry it happened." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Caleb, this is affecting my job now. Over nothing. Over a harmless joke that you turned into a big deal by acting all wounded and dramatic at the party." He set down his pen and looked at me directly for the first time in days. "I didn't turn it into anything, Ivadne. You posted about it publicly. You made it a big deal." "I posted about it because it was funny. Because sometimes life is absurd, and we should be able to laugh about it instead of treating everything like a federal case." "Is that what you think this is about? My sense of humor?" The question caught me off guard. "Isn't it?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, and I noticed he'd been taking notes in a small notebook that he closed when he saw me looking at it. "Maybe we have different ideas about what's funny," he said finally. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the closed notebook, about the way Caleb had been so methodical and distant lately. When I was sure he was asleep, I crept back to his study and tried to find the notebook, but his desk was locked, something that had never happened before in our 3 years of marriage. The next morning, I called my mother. "Oh, honey," Roxana said after I'd explained the situation, "you're being too hard on yourself. Caleb needs to understand that you're not his property. You're a grown woman who can have friendships and adventures. He's being childish." Her words were exactly what I needed to hear. "You really think so?" "Absolutely. You're married, not buried. If he can't handle you having a life outside of your marriage, that's his problem, not yours." Emboldened by my mother's support, I decided to reach out to Jasper. We met for coffee that afternoon at a little cafe downtown, and I felt lighter than I had in days as soon as I saw his familiar smile. "You look stressed," he observed as I sat down across from him. "Husband still giving you grief?" "He's being ridiculous," I said, grateful to finally have someone who understood. "Acting like I committed some terrible betrayal by sharing a room with you. It's exhausting." Jasper leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I've always thought Caleb was a little too serious. Even in high school, he was always worried about rules and consequences instead of just living in the moment." "Exactly. That's exactly what I mean." I felt validated in a way I hadn't in weeks. Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating in my own marriage. "That's not healthy," Jasper said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "You're too vibrant to be dimmed by someone else's insecurities." His touch sent a small thrill through me, and I didn't pull away immediately. When I finally did, I noticed a woman at the next table glancing at us with interest. For a moment, I worried about appearances, but then I pushed the concern aside. I was having coffee with a friend. There was nothing wrong with that. When I got home, Caleb was in the kitchen making dinner. He looked up when I entered, and I saw something flicker across his face when he noticed my improved mood. "Good coffee date?" he asked casually. I froze. "How did you—" "You posted about it." He nodded toward my phone. "Checked in at Brewster's Cafe with Jasper." I had completely forgotten about the automatic check-in feature. "It wasn't a date. We're friends, Caleb. I'm allowed to have friends." "Of course you are." His voice was maddeningly calm. "I never said you weren't." But there was something in his tone that suggested he was keeping track of these things, filing them away somewhere in that methodical mind of his. It made me feel defensive and guilty at the same time, which only made me angrier. "You're doing that thing again," I said. "What thing?" "That passive-aggressive thing where you act like everything's fine but you're actually judging me." Caleb turned back to the stove, stirring something that smelled like tomato sauce. "I'm not judging you, Ivadne. I'm just observing." "Observing what?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Patterns." The word sent a chill through me, though I couldn't quite say why. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about patterns and observations, and the locked drawer in Caleb's desk. My husband had always been organized, but lately his precision felt different, more deliberate, more purposeful. Like he was building a case instead of just keeping records. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my guilt over the innocent coffee date with Jasper was making me imagine things that weren't there. But as I listened to Caleb's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us, and that maybe, just maybe, it was too late to shift it back. The following Sunday, we drove to Caleb's parents' house for our weekly family lunch. I'd been dreading it all morning, knowing that news of the hotel incident had probably reached them by now. The Hartley family had always been close-knit and traditional, and I could already imagine the disapproving looks I'd receive. Richard Hartley opened the door with his usual reserved smile, but I noticed how he greeted Caleb with an extra firm handshake and barely made eye contact with me. Eleonora, Caleb's mother, was more welcoming, but there was a tension in her hug that hadn't been there before. "Ivadne, dear," she said, "how are you holding up?" Holding up, as if I were recovering from some tragedy instead of dealing with my husband's overreaction to a harmless situation. "I'm fine," I said brightly, "looking forward to your pot roast." Lydia, Caleb's 24-year-old sister, was less diplomatic. She barely acknowledged me when we walked into the living room, focusing instead on showing Caleb something on her phone. "Did you see this article about social media and professional reputation?" she asked him, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's amazing how one post can follow you forever." The comment was clearly directed at me, and I felt my temper flare. Some people need to worry less about other people's social media and more about their own lives, I said, keeping my voice light but letting the barb show through. Lydia looked up at me with Caleb's same steady gaze. Some people need to worry more about their husband's feelings and less about getting attention from strangers online. "Lydia," Eleonora warned, but her daughter wasn't finished. "I mean, seriously, Ivadne, Caleb's my brother and I love him. Watching him be humiliated in public while you laugh about it isn't something I'm going to pretend is okay." The room fell silent. I looked around for support, but even Eleonora seemed to be waiting for my response, rather than rushing to defend me. "It wasn't humiliation," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "It was a joke, a situation that got blown completely out of proportion by people who don't understand that married couples can trust each other." "Trust?" Lydia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think posting photos of yourself in a bathrobe with another man is about trust?" "It was a hotel bathrobe. We were fully clothed. Nothing happened." "Then why are you still posting about it? Why are you meeting up with this guy for coffee dates and checking in on social media, like you want everyone to know about it?" I felt trapped, surrounded by hostile faces and accusations I couldn't properly defend without revealing details I didn't want to share. "Because he's my friend, and I refuse to end a friendship because my husband is insecure." The word insecure hung in the air like a slap. I saw Richard's jaw tighten and Eleonora's face fall. Even Caleb, who had been silent throughout the exchange, seemed to flinch. "I think," Richard said quietly, "that this conversation has gone far enough." We ate lunch in uncomfortable silence, and I spent the entire meal planning what I would say to Caleb on the drive home about how inappropriate his family's behavior had been. But when we got in the car, he spoke first. "That was unfair to you," he said. "Lydia was out of line." I felt a surge of relief and vindication. "Thank you. I was starting to think you agreed with her. I don't agree with attacking you in my parents' house," he paused, "but I don't disagree with everything she said either." The relief evaporated. "Meaning what?" "Meaning maybe it's time we talked about what's really going on here." "Nothing is going on. How many times do I have to say that?" Caleb pulled into our driveway but didn't turn off the engine immediately. "Ivadne, I found your text messages with Jasper." My blood turned to ice. "You went through my phone?" "You left it on the kitchen counter, unlocked. A message popped up while I was standing there." I tried to remember what Jasper and I had been texting about lately. Nothing inappropriate, surely. Just friendly conversation, maybe some complaining about Caleb's reaction to the hotel situation. And, I challenged, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. And you've been telling him that I'm controlling and jealous, that you feel trapped in your marriage, that you wish you could be with someone who appreciates your spontaneous side. Each word hit me like a physical blow. I had said those things, but they were just venting, just frustration talking. Everyone complained about their spouse to their friends sometimes. Those were private conversations, I said weakly, about our marriage, with another man, a man you shared a bed with. Caleb. I'm not done. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. I also know that you didn't just share a bed platonically. I know he kissed you, I know you kissed him back, and I know you've been planning to see him again. The world seemed to tilt sideways. How could you possibly know that? Because you talk in your sleep, Ivadne. You've been having very detailed conversations with Jasper in your dreams for the past 2 weeks. I felt like I was drowning. Everything I'd carefully constructed, every story I'd told myself about innocent friendships and harmless jokes, was crumbling around me. It didn't mean anything, I whispered. Maybe not to you. We sat in the car for several more minutes, the engine ticking as it cooled. When Caleb finally spoke again, his voice was different, not angry or hurt, but oddly businesslike. I'd been documenting everything, he said. The social media posts, the text messages, the lies, the timeline of events. I wanted to make sure I had the facts straight before I made any decisions. What kind of decisions? He turned to look at me directly, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before, a kind of cold clarity that made my stomach drop. I'll let you know when I've made them. That night, I couldn't eat dinner. I kept thinking about Caleb's methodical documentation, about the locked drawer in his desk, about the way he'd been observing patterns instead of just reacting emotionally like I'd expected him to. I tried to text Jasper, but the messages I typed sounded desperate and needy when I read them back. Instead, I deleted them and posted on Facebook. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who understand you least. Grateful for friends who see the real me. The post got immediate likes and supportive comments, but for the first time, the validation felt hollow. I found myself wondering what Caleb was doing in his study, what he was writing in that notebook, what decisions he was contemplating. When I finally worked up the courage to check on him, I found the study door locked. He'd never locked me out before. In 3 years of marriage, that door had always been open to me. Now it wasn't, and somehow that felt like the most ominous development yet. 2 weeks later, I made a decision that I told myself was about reclaiming my independence, but was really about proving to Caleb that I wouldn't be controlled or intimidated by his silent treatment. Jasper was having another party, and this time I was going whether Caleb liked it or not. You don't have to come if you don't want to, I told my husband as I got ready, applying makeup with more care than the occasion warranted. But I'm not going to stop living my life because you've decided to be suspicious of every friendship I have. Caleb looked up from his laptop, where he'd been working on something that he quickly minimized when I walked into the room. I never asked you to stop living your life. Didn't you? All this documenting and questioning and locked doors. What is that if not trying to control me? It's protecting myself, he said quietly. The response caught me off guard. From what? From making decisions based on emotion instead of facts. I stared at him, trying to understand what he meant, but his expression was unreadable. Fine. Whatever. I'll be back later. Ivadne. His voice stopped me at the door. Be careful tonight. There was something in his tone that made me pause. Not anger or jealousy, but something that sounded almost like concern. For a moment, I considered staying home, trying to work through whatever was happening between us, instead of running away to another party. But then, I thought about the locked study door, and the cold way he'd been treating me, and my resolve hardened. I'm always careful, I said, and left. The party was smaller this time, more intimate. Jasper greeted me with a hug that lasted a beat too long, and I found myself leaning into it more than I should have. "Where's the husband?" he asked, scanning the room behind me. "Home. He's not really the party type." "His loss," Jasper said, his hand lingering on my lower back. "Come on, let me get you a drink." The evening progressed with a dangerous momentum. I found myself drinking more than usual, laughing louder, staying closer to Jasper than friendship strictly required. When someone suggested taking group photos, I posed with my arm around Jasper's waist, my head on his shoulder, both of us grinning at the camera. "Post that one," I told the photographer, a friend of Jasper's named Mike. "It's cute." Later, when the crowd had thinned and I was sitting on Jasper's couch with my shoes kicked off and my inhibitions lowered by wine, he sat down next to me closer than he ever had before. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about what you said about feeling trapped." "Have you?" The words came out more breathily than I intended. "You deserve someone who appreciates how amazing you are. Someone who doesn't make you feel guilty for being yourself." His hand found mine, and this time I didn't pull away. "Jasper, I'm just saying life's short. We should be with people who make us feel alive." When he leaned in to kiss me, I let him. For about 30 seconds, I let myself get lost in the feeling of being wanted and appreciated and seen as exciting instead of problematic. Then reality crashed back in, and I pulled away. "I can't. I'm married. To someone who doesn't understand you. It doesn't matter. I can't." But even as I said it, I was thinking about how good it had felt to be kissed by someone who thought I was worth pursuing instead of documenting. I called an Uber and went home, where I found Caleb exactly where I'd left him, working on his laptop in the study. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, taking in my disheveled appearance and flushed cheeks. "Good party?" he asked. "Fine." I couldn't meet his eyes. "I'm going to bed." "Ivadne." His voice stopped me again. "I know what happened tonight." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" Mike texted me the photos, including the ones from after most people left. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Caleb, I can explain." "No need. I have everything I need now." He turned back to his laptop, dismissing me as if I were no more significant than a student turning in a late assignment. The casual indifference was somehow worse than anger would have been. The next morning, I woke up to find several important documents missing from our home office. Insurance papers, bank statements, the deed to our house. When I asked Caleb about them, he said he'd moved them to a safer location. "What kind of safer location?" "A safe deposit box." "Since when do we have a safe deposit box?" "Since I opened one last week." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "You're planning to leave me." Caleb finished his coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink, drying it carefully and putting it away in the cabinet. "I'm planning for various possibilities." "This is insane." "Over one kiss that didn't even mean anything." "It's not about one kiss, Ivadne. It's about a pattern of choices that show me who you really are and what our marriage really means to you." "You don't know what our marriage means to me." He turned to face me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw real emotion in his eyes. Not anger, but something deeper and more painful. "Then tell me," he said. "Tell me what it means to you. Tell me why I should believe that you want to be married to me when everything you do suggests you'd rather be single." The question hung between us, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. Not one that would sound convincing when weighed against weeks of evidence to the contrary. "I love you," I said finally, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "I love you too," Caleb replied, "but I don't think love is enough anymore." That afternoon, I found a note taped to my car windshield. "Downtown 2:30, bring ID." I knew it was from Caleb, though I couldn't imagine what he needed me to do downtown that required identification. When I called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt genuinely afraid. Not of Caleb, he would never hurt me physically, but of what he might be planning with that methodical, careful mind of his. I thought about the safe deposit box, the missing documents, the locked study door. I thought about his calm demeanor in the face of my betrayals, the way he'd been documenting everything instead of fighting about it. Caleb wasn't just protecting himself, I realized. He was building something, a case maybe, a foundation for whatever came next. And I was starting to understand that whatever came next, I wasn't going to like it. I didn't go downtown at 2:30. Instead, I sat in my car in our driveway, staring at the note and trying to figure out what Caleb was planning. The uncertainty was eating at me in a way that outright confrontation never could have. When he came home that evening, he didn't mention my absence. He simply made dinner for himself, ate it while reading a book, and retreated to his study. The locked door had become a symbol of everything that was wrong between us, and I found myself standing outside it for long minutes, listening to the soft sounds of typing and paper shuffling within. "Caleb," I called through the door, "we need to talk." "Do we?" His voice was muffled but clear. "About what?" "About whatever you're planning, about why you wanted me to meet you downtown, about what's in that safe deposit box." The typing stopped. After a moment, I heard his chair creak and then his footsteps approaching the door, but he didn't open it. "I'm not planning anything, Ivadne. I'm just being prepared." "Prepared for what?" "For the inevitable." The word sent a chill through me. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm not going to be caught off guard when this marriage ends. I'm not going to be the naive husband who trusted too much and lost everything because he didn't see the signs. Our marriage isn't ending. I pressed my palm against the door, as if I could reach through it to touch him. "Caleb, please, open the door. Let's talk about this face to face." "I don't think that's a good idea right now." "Why not?" "Because I'm still deciding whether anything you say can be trusted." The words hit me like a slap. "That's not fair, isn't it?" The door remained closed, but I could hear him moving around inside the room. "You lied to me about what happened in that hotel room. You lied about your feelings for Jasper. You lied about the coffee dates and the text messages. You lied about the kiss at the party. At what point should I start believing you're telling the truth?" I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to point out that they weren't really lies, but just incomplete truths, omissions, things I hadn't said because I knew they would hurt him unnecessarily. But standing there in the hallway, listening to my husband list my deceptions through a locked door, I couldn't find the words to make any of it sound reasonable. "I never meant for any of this to happen," I said finally. "I know," Caleb replied, and there was something almost gentle in his voice. "That's what makes it worse." The next morning, I woke up to find Caleb already gone. There was no note, no indication of where he'd went or when he'd be back. His coffee mug was washed and put away, his side of the bed was made with military precision, and his laptop was missing from the study. I spent the day in a state of anxious energy, cleaning the house obsessively and checking my phone every few minutes for messages that never came. When evening arrived and Caleb still wasn't home, I started calling his friends and family. "He's fine," Lydia told me when I reached her. "He's staying with us for a few days." "Why?" "Because he needs space to think, and you need time to figure out what you really want." "I want my husband to come home." "Do you?" Lydia's voice was skeptical. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want the security of being married and the excitement of being single. And you can't have both." The conversation ended with her hanging up on me, and I was left alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet. That night, I made a decision that I knew was probably a mistake, but couldn't seem to stop myself from making. I drove to Jasper's apartment. He answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, his hair messy like he'd been sleeping. "Ivadne? What are you doing here?" "My husband left me," I said, and started crying before I'd even finished the sentence. Jasper pulled me inside and wrapped me in his arms, and for a moment I let myself believe that this was comfort instead of confirmation of everything Caleb suspected about me. "Tell me what happened," Jasper said, leading me to his couch. I told him everything: the locked study, the missing documents, the safe deposit box, Caleb's methodical documentation of my every move. As I talked, I watched Jasper's expression grow increasingly concerned. "That's intense," he said when I finished. "Like, really intense. Are you sure he's not planning something drastic?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, that level of documentation and preparation. It sounds like he's building a legal case against you." The possibility had been lurking in the back of my mind, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified me. "He wouldn't," I said. "Caleb's not vindictive. He's just methodical." "Methodical enough to destroy you in a divorce?" I stared at Jasper, trying to process what he was suggesting. "We're not getting divorced." "Aren't you?" He reached for my hand. "Ivadne, maybe this is the universe telling you something. Maybe this is your chance to be with someone who actually appreciates you." When he kissed me this time, I didn't pull away. I let him lead me to his bedroom, let him make me feel wanted and desired and free from the weight of Caleb's disappointed silences. But afterward, lying in Jasper's bed while he slept beside me, I felt worse than I ever had in my life. Not because of guilt, I was past that now, but because I finally understood what Caleb had been trying to tell me. This wasn't about one hotel room, or one kiss, or one lie. It was about who I was and what I wanted, and whether I was capable of being the kind of person who could be truly married to someone. And lying there in another man's bed while my husband stayed at his sister's house, I had my answer. I slipped out before dawn, driving home through empty streets as the sun came up over a world that looked exactly the same as it had the day before, but felt completely different. When I got home, I found an envelope taped to my front door. My name was written on it in Caleb's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address and a time. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone." At the bottom, in smaller print, he'd written, "Bring your wedding ring." I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Caleb's note and turning my wedding ring around and around on my finger. The simple gold band felt heavier than it ever had before, weighted with the significance of what it represented and what I was about to lose. At 9:45 a.m., I stood outside a downtown office building, checking the address on the note for the third time. The building housed several law firms, and my stomach churned as I realized what this meant. Caleb was waiting for me in the lobby, dressed in his best suit and carrying a leather briefcase I'd never seen before. He looked older somehow, more serious, like he'd aged years in the few days since I'd seen him last. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice politely formal. "Caleb, please, can we just talk? Just the two of us, without lawyers?" We tried talking, it didn't work. He led me to an elevator and pressed the button for the 7th floor. We rode up in silence, and I found myself memorizing the details of his profile. The way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the small scar on his chin from a childhood accident, the wedding ring he still wore on his left hand. The law office was all mahogany and leather, designed to intimidate and impress. A receptionist directed us to a conference room where a middle-aged woman in a sharp suit was waiting with several thick folders arranged neatly on the table. "Mrs. Hartley," the lawyer said, standing to shake my hand. "I'm Jennifer Walsh. Please, have a seat." I sat across from Caleb, the polished table stretching between us like an ocean. Ms. Walsh opened the first folder and began pulling out documents. Photographs, printed text messages, social media screenshots, bank statements, and what looked like a detailed timeline written in Caleb's precise handwriting. "Mr. Hartley has documented a pattern of infidelity and financial irresponsibility," Ms. Walsh began, her voice businesslike. "These materials support his petition for divorce and his requests regarding asset division." I stared at the evidence of my betrayal spread across the table like a roadmap of my failures. There were photos from both parties with Jasper, screenshots of text messages I thought were private, even printed copies of my social media posts with timestamps and engagement metrics noted in the margins. I struggled to find words. This is excessive. This is thorough, Ms. Walsh corrected. Mr. Hartley wanted to ensure that all relevant information was properly documented. She began walking through the evidence systematically, and I watched my marriage dissolve into a collection of facts and dates and digital receipts. The hotel room incident, the coffee dates, the text messages complaining about Caleb, the photos from the parties, and finally, timestamped security camera footage from Jasper's apartment building showing me entering at 11:47 p.m. 3 nights ago and leaving at 5:23 a.m. "You had me followed," I whispered. Caleb spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. "I had the building security footage subpoenaed after the property manager confirmed you'd been there overnight." "You subpoenaed." I couldn't finish the sentence. The level of legal preparation was staggering. Ms. Walsh continued outlining the terms of the divorce petition. Caleb was seeking an uncontested dissolution of marriage with a specific division of assets that heavily favored him, citing my infidelity as grounds. He would keep the house, the majority of their joint savings, and his pension. I would receive my personal belongings, my car, and a small settlement that would cover about 3 months of living expenses. "This isn't fair," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's generous," Ms. Walsh replied. "Given the documented infidelity, Mr. Hartley could pursue a more aggressive asset division." I looked across the table at my husband, searching his face for any sign of the man I'd married. "Caleb, please. This isn't you. You're not vindictive." "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm not vindictive, but I'm also not stupid." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a final folder, this one thicker than the others. "This contains documentation of every lie you've told me over the past month, every secret meeting with Jasper, every social media post designed to humiliate me publicly, and every financial transaction you've made without discussing it with me first." I hadn't realized he'd been tracking my spending too, but there it was. Receipts from expensive lunches, clothing purchases, even the money I'd spent on new makeup and lingerie that I'd told myself was just for me, but had really been for Jasper. "I gave you multiple opportunities to be honest with me," Caleb continued. "I asked direct questions. I told you I was documenting things. I even gave you chances to end this before it went too far." "I know, but you chose to keep lying. You chose to keep seeing him. You chose to spend last night in his bed instead of trying to save our marriage." The words hung in the air like a verdict. I wanted to argue, to explain, to make him understand that it hadn't been a choice so much as a series of small decisions that had spiraled out of control. But looking at the evidence spread across the table, I could see how calculated it all looked from the outside. Ms. Walsh slid a document across the table to me. "These are the divorce papers. You have 30 days to respond with your own legal representation, or you can sign now and accept the terms as outlined." I stared at the papers, my vision blurring with tears. What if I don't sign? What if I fight this? "Then we go to court," Ms. Walsh said matter-of-factly, "and all of this evidence becomes public record. Your employer will likely be subpoenaed to testify about the workplace complaints regarding your social media posts. Jasper will be deposed about the nature of your relationship. Your family and friends will be called to testify about what they observed." The thought of my private humiliation becoming a public spectacle was unbearable. I looked at Caleb one more time, hoping to see some softness in his expression, some indication that he still loved me enough to reconsider. Instead, I saw the same calm determination he'd shown throughout this entire process. He'd made his decision weeks ago, and everything since then had just been preparation for this moment. "I need a pen," I said quietly. Ms. Walsh handed me an expensive-looking fountain pen, and I signed my name on the designated lines, officially ending my marriage with a few strokes of ink. When it was over, Caleb stood and gathered his materials with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. He paused at the door and turned back to me. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Ivadne," he said. "I really do." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in the conference room with Ms. Walsh and the ruins of everything I'd thought I wanted. The lawyer gave me copies of the signed documents and explained the timeline for the divorce to be finalized. As I walked out of the building and into the bright afternoon sunlight, I realized I was holding my wedding ring in my palm without remembering when I'd taken it off. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. "How did it go? Want to celebrate your freedom tonight?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. I drove home to what was still technically my house for another 30 days and sat in the driveway, looking at the windows of the study where Caleb had spent so many quiet evenings preparing for this day. He'd been right about patterns, I realized. I had made a series of choices that revealed who I really was and what I actually valued. And now I was free to be that person completely, without the constraint of marriage vows or the burden of someone else's expectations. I should have felt liberated. Instead, I felt empty. My phone rang, and I saw my mother's name on the screen. "How did the meeting go, sweetheart?" Roxana asked when I answered. "It's over," I said. "The marriage is over." "Well," she said after a pause, "maybe that's for the best. You're young, you're beautiful, you have your whole life ahead of you. Now you can find someone who appreciates your spirit." I hung up without responding and sat in my car until the sun set, thinking about appreciation and spirit and the difference between being understood and being enabled. When I finally went inside, I found a note on the kitchen counter in Caleb's handwriting. "Peace is better than pretending." He was right about that too. For the first time in months, the house was completely quiet. No tension, no unspoken accusations, no careful documentation of my failures. Just silence and space, and the freedom I'd thought I wanted. It felt exactly like what I deserved.